Hello, you're listening to Nick Needs to Know, the podcast. Join me for 2 special episodes this South Asian Heritage Month, where I have my usual conversations joined by 2 very special guests. On this episode, I am joined by Amardeep Parmar, co-founder of the BAEHQ, Entrepreneur's Handbook podcast host, an angel investor, and TEDx Chigwell curator, where we speak about his life and career, both past and present. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy. Good morning, Amar.
Morning.
Thank you for joining me today here at lovely Sky headquarters in Hosteley. I think they've been kind enough to give us a little, I don't know, what is it, a greenhouse or a glass box, or how would you describe this room? Very greenhousey, isn't
very
it?
Very greenhousey, yeah. And we can see people walking past.
People
nice.
staring at us like we're some sort of wild animals at a zoo. But it is nice. Thank you for joining me today on Nick Needs to Know's podcast. 2 special episodes that we're doing this month for South Asian Heritage Month. So we'll talk about a little bit about that as we go through the podcast. You're the co-founder of BAE headquarters, which is British Asian Entrepreneurs Handbook host. Is that a podcast?
That's the podcast as well, yeah.
Yeah, so got an easy guest today, knows what he's doing, and an angel investor, TEDx Chigwell curator. Talk to me a little bit about that one.
Well, the last one there.
Yeah, TEDx one, yeah.
So what I find is obviously so many people who want to come on the podcast that I do, they say, I'm a TEDx speaker. And then if you look at the general TEDx level, it's not often that great if you go on the YouTube channel, right? So I'm thinking I know a lot of people now who've done lots of different interesting things. I want to have a bit more of a local community feel as well. So to me, it just seemed like a natural fit. Why don't I organise an event? And I'm able to then give a voice and platform to some people that maybe wouldn't fit into my other platforms. And I also get to meet people in the local area, because I think it's one of those challenges now, right? People talk about remote working and you get to connect people over the world, but having people around you in person, you can just go and grab a coffee at any time, or when you're not feeling too great, they can just pop over your house. I think that community side is what I want to really start getting more into as well.
Oh, good. So the concept behind Nick Needs to Know is not so much what you're doing now, but the journey you've been on to get to where you are now. So I wonder if you could take me back to your first ever paid job or unpaid job, and talk me through the timeline up until current day, and we'll see where this conversation takes us.
Sure. I had to think about this. I think my first ever job was moving boxes for my dad. So my dad was an accountant.
Okay.
And old school accountants had lots of files, lots of boxes of different things, and I had to try and move them around from storage, and he would mark which ones are old and go into like external storage, ones you need to keep here. So it wasn't particularly fun. And there's a reason he got me to do it rather than hire somebody to do it, because it wasn't very enjoyable.
Cheaper,
yeah, exactly. I think it was £4 an hour. This is maybe when I was 15 in the summer.
Yeah.
And for me, that's a lot of money, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
8 hours a day, £4 an hour, you get what, £32 a day. Back then, obviously, that meant I could get McDonald's for lunch, which is pay for it myself. And off the back of that, that was just, it was hard graft, because we were just moving around boxes all day. It was summer. It wasn't particularly nice conditions sometimes. But it just introduced me in that way, I guess. And that was my summer jobs for a couple of years. And I think after that, when did I next actually work? It's got to have been my placement year. This is probably testing my memory in some ways, right? So I did economics at University of Bath.
Mm-hmm.
And as part of that, you do a year placement year. So that placement year was the Bank of England for me. And you had to apply to lots of jobs, and everyone's competing, because you're all in the same class, right? So everybody's competing for the same jobs. There's not that many universities to do placement years. So you're going along, you get to the final 5 and then the final 2, and then you don't get it. And eventually I got this Bank of England role. And it's 10 years ago now, but I think it was a really good, for me, environment to be in, because I was working for the External Monetary Policy Committee Unit, which sounds fancy, but it's the guys who decide the interest rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was the one helping them to do their research, to do their speeches. I'm credited on those kind of talks. So I had this exposure to some of these like top people in the country at that young age. And I probably didn't appreciate it enough, to be honest, at the time, because it was very, very heavy intellectually. So sometimes you'd get very tired sitting there, and you'd be in these meetings with these people who were Oxford professors, or they were head of Goldman Sachs research, whatever it was. And you're just trying to keep up. So it's very, very heavily mentally, and a lot of analytical work. But off the back of that, I was very lucky to be able to sit in the room with those kind of people.
Yeah.
And what was fun about that as well, there's a big network of us, maybe 30 or so people from the University of Bath who all were working at the Bank of England for that placement year, and then people from other universities as well. So it's kind of nice to have that feel, and we would all go for lunch together. And one of the things I remember from my feedback was I had this network of people who'd get stuff done for me.
Yeah.
Because I think I've always been like this. So I like chatting, obviously podcasts and all this stuff now, right? But at the time it was, I get bored of just sitting there, right? So I'd always be on what was it, Microsoft Teams? I can't remember what it's called back then. Talking to other graduates on the program, not even graduates at that point, and other students in that program. And because I was willing to talk to people even when I didn't need something, and I think that's important in generally for life, is that's got me really far. Because
sort of networking.
Yeah. But it's networking without needing anything, right? It's just enjoying the chat.
Yeah.
Like ask people at the weekend, like people, teams, like these support and things like that. And I think that's a big part with the Bank of England, where I was able to get a lot of things done, because often it's bureaucracy, right? It's public sector. We've just lost our sign, but we survived. But I think that was a big part of it, right? Is I enjoyed that side of things and getting to know people. And when they did come for something to work, then people were more willing to help, because you'd shown that you didn't just care about them when you needed something. Yeah. And that's often what I think people do.
You went to university and studied economics.
Correct, yeah.
And was that your focus throughout your career then? Did you, because a lot of people I speak to went to university, studied certain things and had a career path in mind. And then actually when they went into the big wide world, they went a totally different way. And those grades and qualifications that they got were no use whatsoever. It was just an experience that they went through. So have you carried that on through your career then?
It's interesting because I think at A-level, I did biology, chemistry, maths and economics, right? Yeah. So it was basically, do I go down the doctor dentist route or do I go in the economics route? And I chose economics mainly because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I didn't want to be a doctor or a dentist passionately enough to go down that path. So economics was me buying time in a way. That's why I picked it. And I knew off the back of that, you could get high paying jobs, all that kind of stuff. But I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And even when I was leaving university, I think I applied to so many different types of jobs. Yeah. Because I didn't know. So I would apply for consulting, I'd apply for audit, I'd apply for banking and asset management. But there was no real rhythm or like reason to what I was applying for. It was the idea of when you're at school, it's like, oh, I want to do a fast-paced job, right? What does that even mean? Like, you want to get a job that's high-paying, basically, is what I wanted. And that was just off the back of the peer group I was in, where everybody's doing well. But what I actually enjoyed, I had no idea. And I mean, the Bank of England helped in some ways, because you learn a bit more about my working styles and things like that. But yeah, I just had no idea. So I ended up going into tech consulting.
Okay.
But that was an accident, because the job title said business application consultant. So I just thought that's business, where it was a lot more techy than I imagined. And it worked out in the end that I enjoyed different parts of it. But what I think I really enjoyed from my degree was more of the intellectual news side of it, right? Of understanding why things happen in the economy and where money moves in companies, and like how different things in the government decisions affect things. So I think I kept that interest throughout my entire life. And economics has meant that I'm able to better understand those trends. And with the stuff I do now with the business side, I can understand things like deeper, like the actual theoretical knowledge of why things happen, which gives me that mix now practical sense. But yeah, in my career, then, I guess I can admit this now, I'm long gone, right? But once I started that job, the person who joined with me, they quit after a couple of days because they realized it wasn't the right job for them.
Yeah.
And in my head, I was thinking, I don't know if this is the right job for me either, because it's a lot more technology based than I was expecting. So I was applying for other jobs at the same time, got through to a few final rounds, but didn't get it. And I ended up staying in that first company for 6.5 years.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I enjoyed different projects, and you get more responsibility, and you obviously get that feeling of achievement, right? But I knew I didn't want to do this long term. But because I didn't know what I wanted to do long term, you just keep going. What do I apply for? If I'm going to leave here, I need to have a plan of what I'm going to go to. And I didn't have that plan. So I stayed and I enjoyed the people I worked with. I think that was a big part of why I stayed for so long, is that my bosses were great. Like, even when I left eventually, they encouraged me. They said, you're going to do really good whatever you go into. So I had that supportive environment, but the actual job itself, I was starting to feel like I was coasting. I didn't feel like it was what I wanted to do.
So 6 years is, I would say nowadays, is a long time in one job. Long gone are those jobs there that are for life. I mean, there might be an handful of jobs out there that are for life, but so within those 6 years, was there any progression within that company for yourself, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so it's quite a linear progression in terms of consulting. You start off as a junior, then you become a senior, then it's senior level 1, level 2. Then for me, so I was senior level 2 and I left. And the next stage would have been principal. And if I had stayed, then I'd probably got principal within the next year, which is a big pay rise. But at the time, I was basically trying to decide, am I staying here for that big pay rise and that title? But if I'm going to go and do something else anyway, what's the point of me sticking around for a title and a pay rise? And that was the internal conflict I have at that point of, am I sticking around for the new job title, which then can help me get another job maybe or another career? But is that, and I was kind of questioning myself a lot at that point, like, why am I doing this? But the progression was good. But by the end, I think a lot of it became me running solo projects where they trusted me to just run the project by myself. I'd get the results. Clients would like me. I knew what I was doing, but I lost that element of being able to challenge myself more and being able to manage a team because of the nature of the job, right? The nature of the job was, at that point, the way that the technology progressed, you generally had me leading the project, and then we'd have another consulting company which had cheaper labor doing a lot of the work. So I'd be just leading that project. But it's so dependent on which project you get in consulting, right? One project can be amazing, the next one can be a bit boring, and then you didn't have that control.
So when you've started thinking about moving on and changing careers again, when did those thoughts start coming in within that 6 year period? Were it early doors, or were it a kind of a thought, then an instant action from yourself to do something about it? Or did you stick with those thoughts for a while and let it affect your current work?
I think I always had in the back of my head I wanted to move in many ways, depending on where it was. Some projects I really enjoyed, so I was like loving the company. But I also wasn't going to take action. Yeah. So even when I did leave, it was a fluke in the end. So I can go into that later on. But even at different points, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to leave, I'm going to do it. So I never actually did anything. So how many times in that 6 years did I actually update my CV? Because I was comfortable and I did enjoy the people I worked with. And I think that made a huge difference. So I began coasting, like, I don't really know what I want to do in my life. And this isn't like, it's not necessarily bad. It's just, it wasn't the right thing for me. And I think sometimes people get into a situation where it's, do I take a risk or not? And I just wasn't it's funny considering what I do now, but back then I would never consider myself the kind of person to go and run my own company and do my own thing. I just didn't see myself in that light.
What was it that came about to make you actually take that step and do that jump to the next stage?
So I always had things on the side whenever I had the job. So I did karate, I did dance, I did travel a lot, I did yoga to like a higher level. And it was basically the next challenge that I had on the side, right? Where I was reading a lot of books because it's quarter life crisis time. Like I said, because I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, I was reading a lot of nonfiction. And what I wanted to start doing is writing about those experiences and my own thoughts to try to process that. So I started writing New Year's resolution, January 2020, thinking never did ever read this. It wasn't meant to be leading to what it did. It was just meant to be productive hobby, new year, new me. You know, you get that
cliche,
yeah, exactly. That burst of motivation. But I didn't consider it in a financial aspect. But that first article I wrote, it then blew up, and that one article earned me over probably £2,500 now. So once that's happened, like all of a sudden, okay, this is a potential career, right? I say that. Even then, I thought this is some nice money on the side. I didn't think I'd ever quit my job for it. But that was January 2020, right? Then the pandemic obviously came in March.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden now I had a way more free time. I couldn't really be social. I couldn't go out. So what happened in that period is that I'd have my day job, do my hours. Then in the evenings, I had this thing that seemingly I was good at that I didn't expect. And that was keeping me going in the evenings where I could start writing. I was interacting with the writing world. I was joining these groups and talking about writing all the time. And off the back of that community interaction, I think, especially online, I then became the editor of the main entrepreneurs publication on the platform. So it's called Medium. It's basically like the YouTube of writing, is how I explain it. So you get paid based on the number of people that read your articles, that kind of stuff. And once that happened, all of a sudden I had this massive responsibility where entrepreneurs from all over the world were now sending me articles for me to decide whether or not they were good. And when you consider I only started writing myself 6 months before, it was this very, very fast progression that came out of nowhere. Like I consider it a fluke. You create luck in some ways, right? Because I was helping people out, and even though I was new, I was trying to help out other people. Then people above me saw that and they said, "Oh, you seem to be quite good at editing articles and helping other people. Why don't you do it for us?" And I've had that role of Entrepreneur's Handbook now that was June 2020. It's been over 3 years. So before I was just the editor, then I became the podcast host, like after I quit my job. But it was all now stacking up, right? Where at the beginning, I did think I was just a one-hit wonder. So my first article did very well. It took maybe 3 or 4 months for another article to do that level again.
Yeah.
But then it hit a massive purple patch where it's that thing. Even I question myself, was it, am I being delusional? Am I actually good? Or am I just getting lucky multiple times in a row?
Sort of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And you don't know you're going to be actually good at something until you're bad at it, really, dears. You've got to try it. You've got to be bad to be good, sort of thing, aren't you? So everyone, there's a lot of people I talk to have suffer with imposter syndrome.
And I think it would have been February February 2021, where I started seriously considering, do I go for it? Do I actually take this full time? Because for several months, I've been earning more from the side hustles than from my actual job. So I was thinking, one was that it was also, I had the 3 different pillars, right? So a lot of my life was either going to be work and side hustles. But then once things opened up again after the pandemic, I was going to want to have a social life again. And I couldn't have all 3. Something had to cut. And what do I cut? What am I going to regret the most? I was going to regret losing my social life, definitely. I was going to get the side hustle because I would never know what could I have done. And obviously I was going to regret leaving work too. But it seemed like the one I'd regret the least. And what I actually did is I took a week off in February of that year and I made a PowerPoint presentation of this is my plan, this is what I'm going to do. And I presented it to my family. And the thing with my family is that they were just like, yeah, just go and do it. It was so dismissive of my worries. It was funny. I was trying to convince them, like, but you should be more worried about this. I'm doing something risky here. And my dad was like, no, it'll be fine. Like, I believe in you, you'll be fine. Like, don't worry about it. And it's obviously very atypical for lots of Asian families, South Asians in particular. And I was going from the city job in the consulting world, fairly high prestige. If I talk to a random person on the street and say, oh yeah, I'm a consultant, people think you're important, right? To then going to, oh yeah, I'm a writer. I was like, okay, so you're a starving artist. Great, kind of thing. So it was the whole identity thing in my head of like, am I this kind of person? I went to good university, worked in the city. I'm that kind of corporate professional. So I had to really, I guess, tear apart that self-image I had of myself. And it was really difficult. I had a lot of sleepless nights. Even when I handed in my notice, the immediate period afterwards, I was like, am I an idiot here? Am I just being delusional? Do I think I'm better than I am? Who am I to be doing this? All those kind of questions came from my head. And when I eventually left, so it's 3-month notice period. So I left in June 2021. Now I can't even remember my actual day's job anymore. If you had actually asked me what I did day to day, I wouldn't have a clue. I knew I was like somewhat good at it and it was technical based and I talked to clients and things like that. But my life has moved on so much from that in the last 2 years now. It feels like a different world.
It is quite a contrasting in careers. So you've gone from something that's very structured to then finding out you're quite creative. Is that something that you've always had, that creativity? Because I think writing it is an art form in itself. And then to do that and then within 6 months have a fantastic article, what you've written. Did you know you were always had that creative side in you, or is that something that you found out as it happened?
When I was a kid, so when I was 6 or 7, I used to write stories a lot.
Yeah.
So I used to really enjoy writing when I was little, and I wanted to become an author when I grew up. But I guess growing up happened in a way, right? So when I was in high school, then just abandoned that, right? because it was no longer cool anymore. It was, you do other things. So I had that idea that I used to like writing back then. And then I tried to set up a blog maybe 4 or 5 years before I actually quit my job. And I more got excited about the idea of creating it and the idea of doing it, but I didn't actually keep up with any of the writing. So I spent ages on making the logo for the website and ages on styling it and how it looked and what colors I was going to use. And I think that's a common mistake so many people make, is they get obsessed with the idea of doing something rather than actually doing it.
Yeah.
So if somebody wants to become a writer, go and write. Do it, right? Don't think about, how should I plan it? How should I do this? Same thing with a podcast, say the same thing. Don't plan the podcast forever. Record a few episodes, see if you enjoy it. Because there's no point in spending so long on that part of the ideation and then finding out you don't enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And by experimenting, because I think that's what happened basically, is I experimented with writing. I didn't know it was going to turn into what it did. But because I did that experiment, that's what's led to everything else afterwards. So that's my biggest advice, just experiment, because you just don't know, right? You could be an amazing writer, but you just haven't tried it yet.
There must have been an aspect of anxiety and worries going from somebody paying you X amount of money every month and it's guaranteed, to then taking it to that step where you're responsible for yourself. Do you still have those worries? Or have they subsided? Have you had enough time doing what you're doing to realise, actually, yeah, I can make a life out of this?
I think it does vary. Sometimes I do, but in the last year in particular, I've now got to a stage where for a long time I still considered myself a beginner, whereas I'm not anymore. I've been writing for 3.5 years. I've quit my job 2 years ago. And the big thing I'm trying to do mentally to myself is I'm where I am now because I've earned it. I've got here. I'm not a beginner. I do know what I'm doing, because it's so often you think of yourself, okay, I need to learn more. I need to learn more. And you never stop learning. But I also need to own what I've been able to do now. And the way I see it is, so in the last year, I've intentionally, because of different things that have happened, I haven't been focusing much on income, but I do know that I back myself that I've got the skills to make an income when I need to make it. And I think I've got that track record now that proves to myself, okay, wherever I'm going to set my head to, if I go hard at it, I'm going to be able to do it. And it's something quite I always think about when I give advice to other people as well, because I've got that track record from karate, from my university, from all these different things I've done in my life. But if somebody doesn't have that, I think it's really important to try and build that in some way. Be good at something, anything, just to give yourself that confidence that you can be good at it. And now I'm at the stage where I believe in whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to be good at it. And it sounds arrogant, it can sound whatever it does, but I know I'm going to do it because I'm going to put in the work to do it. And I'm going to ask the right questions, and I'm going to not just take it for granted or entitled that I'm going to be good at it. It's because I'm going to put the work in and act smartly about it.
Leading on to other things that you're doing now as well, British Asian Entrepreneur Headquarters, you're a co-founder of that. Tell me what that involves on a daily basis.
Daily basis? Oh, I can't remember what I did yesterday, let alone what's a normal day. So the Bay HQ actually came about a year and a bit after I quit my job. So for that first year, a lot of it was with the Entrepreneur's Handbook. I get to talk to lots of amazing entrepreneurs across the world, but it is across the world. And so much of it was Zoom calls and people in Silicon Valley. And I also found that a lot of what I was doing I was being inspired by all these incredible people, but I found that my community didn't really have that. And often we didn't really help each other. So when I met my co-founder, we were basically just ranting to each other about, why doesn't this exist? Why don't we help each other out more? And that's where the kind of idea came from. And then, so my dad passed away, and that made it a lot more important to me. So after that happened, then so Bay HQ, I'd say, is 90% of my time. But what that looks like on a weekly basis is just insane. So let's think. The different pillars now. So a big aspect is the podcast, obviously. So I've got the recordings for the podcast. But as you know, it could be 10 in one week and then none the next week. It just really depends on when people book in, what availability is like. Then another huge part of it is all the stuff I do really behind the scenes that is private in many ways. So it's me talking to all the people in the community, connecting them together. Oh, okay, you run a company about this. Oh, I know an investor in that. And making those different things. And it's building up that network of people who want to be able to help each other out. Then it's also organizing events. Again, because of my technical background, I built all the website myself. I built all of that stuff myself as well. And so much of it is relationship management in many ways, I think. I spend, on the average day, I think I talk to over 100 people on my phone. And I'm trying to get better at my boundaries because that's a bit overwhelming and it's really hard to keep up with that amount of people. But I think a huge amount of what I do now is connecting people, helping people, advising people. And it's extremely tiring. So that's why I'm trying to get more back into my roots in a way of this content creator side of scaling the content up. So making something which can be consumed by many people as opposed to going for a coffee chat with 100 people every week or however many people it was.
How do you take back control of your nose? Because you seem to say yes a lot from what I'm listening to. Do you find it too overwhelming sometimes, or how do you relax? How do you switch off?
So part of this, I guess the background of this would be because my dad passed away August 7th last year. So as recording this, like yesterday was the 1 year death anniversary.
Yeah.
So that obviously plays on my mind quite a lot. And in a big way, this last year, the way I've acted the way I have, it's because I'm trying to distract myself. Yeah. I don't want to rest and relax because then that's when I think about grief and the death and everything like that.
But do you not think
it's completely unhealthy?
Yeah, because I think from past experiences, which I can only speak about, suppressing it in that way, eventually it's going to come out, but it may come out in a different form, and it may cause issues that maybe wouldn't have arisen if it had been dealt with head on. Do you often think about that, or do you just think head down, crack on like you're doing?
I think one of my problems is I'm very self-aware. Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean I act how I know I should act. So what I'll tell you to do isn't what I do myself, even though I know that's the right thing. So what I'm trying to do now, like you said, is like really take back control of my time again.
Yeah.
And in a way, I wanted this milestone to pass. So it's arbitrary, but it sets that line in the sand. Okay, now a year is gone. I changed now, right? So what I'm going to be doing is setting very clear ways that people can contact me. So it's more on my terms as opposed to other people's terms, because it's different when you start out where you're really trying to get every single thing now. I don't have enough time to speak to everybody that wants to speak to me more. And I've got to accept that and make it more scalable, right? Where it's better for me to do an open event where a bunch of people speak to me at once, or do open office hours as opposed to every single person talking to me. And I've got an assistant now, for example, so that's going to help out a lot because she's going to read a lot of my messages before it gets to me rather than me having to reply to everybody myself. And that kind of filtration aspect is going to be really important. And it's also just being really clear about what I'm trying to do and what I want. And there's a lot of people I like a lot who are great people, but they don't necessarily fit into what my priorities are right now. And I've got to get better at being okay with saying, okay, look, I really like you, but right now this isn't my priority. And getting stricter at that. So like I said, a big part of it now is I should be taking more holidays. So this year we're in mid-August. I've probably taken 5 days off completely this year. And that includes weekends. I'm including weekends in that, right? So to me, the big thing for the end of this year is I need to be able to take weekends off. That shouldn't be a goal I have. That should be a given, right? And a big part of that is a system. So I need to create better systems so that there's less dependency on me. And I'm very aware of it. And what I've done is get advisors on board and have those advisors keep me in check.
Do you like that dependency on yourself, though? Do you like the sort of control aspects of it? Everything seems to be like your little baby. This is mine. I can't let it go to somebody else, and they might not have the same vision I've got. Do you find that difficult, handing things over like that?
Yeah, I think so. And even as we walked over here, so Tasha, who helped set this up, she said about how she used to edit images, right, on Photoshop and things like that. And then now she's moved teams, somebody else does that for her. Mm-hmm. And I asked her the question, same thing you just asked, of can you give that up, or do you still want them to do it in your way that's really specific? And I am still like that. So I've given up the video editing, for example. So the podcasts are now edited by somebody else. And if they're listening to this, they're probably going to know I give them a lot of feedback on it. And now it's got better to the stage where I'm not needing to review it as much. And like I said, a big part of it is the prioritization of, is this what I should be spending my time on or not? Can I just be okay with somebody else doing it that maybe isn't exactly how I want to do it, but is good enough for what the wider goal is? Yeah. And I think it's seeing the forest for the trees. Right? It's like, what am I actually trying to achieve here? It's not about, is there an arm in the podcast that shouldn't be there? That's not going to make a big difference. It's not going to move the needle. And it's me focusing more on what are the skills that I have that can actually make a difference? And where can I delegate more? Where can I just let up control? And like I said, it's hard. It's not easy, but I've interviewed enough people who've told me the same advice.
Yeah.
I need to start taking it and actioning it. So it's good I think it's always good to be called out on that as well, right? And
because I think you give up one thing, but I think instantly you're picking up another thing because you start micromanaging and overwatching. So you're doing their job for them, but not physically, but trying to get them to do what you want them to do. And yeah, it's a tough one. I've heard it a lot. We spoke about your family. Do you have children?
No children, no. So I shook my head there, but obviously the audience can't see that.
There's no subtitles on a podcast.
Yeah, so I don't have kids and I'm not married.
No, do you plan on anything like that? Children, marriage?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a case of I want to make sure that it's with the right person. I think I've seen lots of people, whether it's friends or people in like wider family, where maybe they've wanted marriage or kids so badly that they've had it with the wrong person. So it's trying to make sure that I have that relationship that actually matters and building it in that way.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't want to be with somebody for the sake of being married. It should be being with somebody because that's the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. And in a way, because so with my own parents, they had an arranged marriage, right? But to me, even though they had that arranged marriage, the way that things grew up over time where, like, for example, when my dad, he was sick, the first thing he did when he woke up was like, how's mum, right? He was in a hospital bed on a ventilator and he's asking how mum is. Like, she's okay. You're the one in the vent. Like,
yeah.
But I think I've seen that example. So I want to make sure that I want to have that role model. That's what I want to be like in 30 years time, right? Of where I make time for my family. I make time for everybody around me. I care about them and I make sure I do. I want to have that kind of a family as opposed to just rushing through it.
It's about having the time as well, I think, and listening to it. You don't have a lot of time on your hands free at the minute. I mean, 4 days off in 8 months is, including weekends, is quite a lot. So is there anything you do outside of work, like hobbies, or how do you find time to unwind from everything?
I think one of the challenges as well is the blurring of lines, because I say that I haven't had that many days off, but some of the events I go to, it's semi-friends, semi-business, and there's a lot of that overlap now of people I talk to for business reasons and people who are actually just friends. So it's really hard for me to sometimes be able to have that distinction. I want to try and get them in more of spending more time with people who've got no connection at all to anything I'm doing. And I think that's really important. So one of the things that really messed me up as well is that I tore my meniscus last year. So because of that, then I haven't been able to do a lot of the usual hobbies that I would do. So for example, with the dance, right? I want to get back into dancing, but it's not as fun when you've got a torn meniscus, right? It's way more fun when you're good at it.
Yeah. Which
shouldn't be the case, but it is more fun because I really get into it. So I want to start up the dancing again. And it's also just things that are just silly and just, for example, going to comedy shows more often again. So doing these things that are totally unrelated because everything can kind of come back to my job in some ways. So it's looking at what things I can do that have just no relation at all, right? So sports, going to watch football, going to do these different things. That's becoming like increasingly important to me. And it's turning down more people who want to meet up with me for business reasons to pick my brain. So I have more time to meet with people who just care about me, right? And I care about them. And that's a big priority for me this year of why I'm going to do all the time boxing, why I'm going to do that stuff. It's not so I can get more done. It's so that I can have more time for the people I actually care about and to have fun. Because I think there's a nature of, with what happened last year is, in a way, I've sacrificed fun a lot in the last year because it's almost a guilt aspect as well, right? Of should I be enjoying myself? And obviously I should be, right? Because my dad would have wanted me to have fun. And I think that's a huge element now that I really want to make sure that I'm conscious of and do more things that just don't, like, they don't need to have a reason or so turning down business events for going to cinema, things like that, right? It's changing that decision-making in my own head to make sure I have the time and the space for that.
So there's been a lot of sacrifices with the sound of things throughout your career. Obviously, the first sacrifice was your employment. Have you had to sacrifice anything else, like outside of work, like friendships and things? Or have your friends that you've surrounded yourself with been supportive of everything you've done? Have they been there? Are they still there? Or is it a totally different circle now that you're moving in a different circle career-wise?
This, again, something I think about quite a lot, where I think one of the challenges is that a lot of people who want to talk to me in a business sense, they don't really care about what's going on in my life, right? So they can see I'm busy, but they want something from me, so they're going to message me anyway.
Yeah.
Whereas what I've had from some of my friends, like, oh, I just see you're really busy, so then I haven't asked about meeting up because I don't want, like, I know you're busy kind of thing. So it's, the weird thing is that people are more considerate. Sometimes they aren't asking to meet up, whereas those are the people I do want to meet up with. So you have this weird paradox of the people who don't care about you, the ones who want to meet up. The people who do care, they're like, oh, I know you're really busy, so like you just get your stuff done and then we can catch up when you're more free. But it's like, I always say it to people, it's like, if I actually care about somebody as an actual friend, I can make time. I will cut out other stuff. I'll do that, right? But another big part too is a lot of people just don't know how to act with grief. And I didn't know how to act with grief. I don't know how to act with other people's grief now, right? So sometimes people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they just might not reach out. And what that then does with some friendships is then you can start second guessing, like, oh, they don't care because they're not messaging. And it's that thing of what I'm trying to make sure I do is just be more tolerant of people, right? It's like, it's not, I probably haven't been the best friend to people who've lost somebody in their lives in the past. So how can I then expect everybody around me to know exactly what to do? And it's just having that forgiveness element of it as well.
I think that's just human nature though, isn't it? I mean, when things happen to us, we tend to think about only us and why this has happened and why this, why me. So I think that's just human nature, isn't it?
But I guess with a question as well is, one, like I said, I'm trying to spend more time with my friends who, they don't really understand what I do and they don't really care. Because even when I think back to when I had a normal job, nobody really cared about what I did for my job, right? That's not why they were friends with me. And I want to get back to more of those kind of friendships and like really nurture those kind of people who aren't just friends with me because, oh, I did a cool thing. Oh, because I'm at Sky. Like there's a lot of people who might reach out because they've done something cool. Whereas I want to be with the people who they don't really care about. Like that's just noise to them. Like a lot of my good friends don't even listen to the podcast they do, right? They have no idea, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes a lot of people get mixed up with the supporting in a business sense versus supporting in a friendship sense. Somebody doesn't, like, if my friend is a doctor, I don't clap every time they save a life.
Yeah.
So why should they have to like every post I do, right? So,
but you expect that in the beginning, I think, especially with me doing a podcast, I found that I was wanting my friends and family to be the ones that first put a thumbs up or a love at or were the first listeners. But like you say, it's very topical, isn't it, podcasting? You've got to really want to be into it to listen to it. What does the next 5 years look like for yourself?
What does next week look like in 5 years?
Well, what you must have sat down and think, right, you know, the old Del Boy thing, this time next year I'll be a millionaire.
Yeah.
What is that for you? What does that look like for you, your future thoughts?
So I think a big part is hopefully 5 years' time, it's about family. Hopefully found the right person, married, maybe have a kid, I don't know, like don't want to put timelines on that.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
I've got 3. You can borrow one of mine and trial run.
Yeah, sure. Sounds good. Yeah. Just a bit of human trafficking. Then don't worry, there's no record. It's not just recorded or anything, right? So I think that's a huge part. And I want to, by this time in 5 years' time, where I'm just more on the strategic side, I'm less in the businesses I'm doing. I'm more being able to, at the top level, making decisions, nudging people in the right directions. But I think if anything I'm doing now is still dependent on me in 5 years' time, then I've failed. Because it should be about me building out the teams and the processes that, like, if, for example, the Bay HQ, if I was hit by a bus tomorrow and it's now over, I failed is where I see it. It's got to be able to survive without me. Because who knows what's going to happen, right? Like, I don't know how my life is going to change from things. Anything I do shouldn't be dependent on me. And I think in 5 years' time too, it's a big part, like I said, it's family and making sure that I've got a lot more time to just do things just for fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of people ask me, like, do I enjoy what I do? And I do enjoy what I do, but there's a difference between enjoying something from a challenge perspective, from a business perspective, from that growth perspective, to just going, having a laugh and playing football, right? And I want to have more time for that going to have a laugh and playing football stuff as well, to have that balance in my life as opposed to just so focused in the career. And
this month, South Asian Heritage Month, which runs from the 18th of July to 17th of August. Each year it is in its infancy. I think 2020 was the first South Asian Heritage Month. What does that mean to you? And how is it going to fit into your future?
So it's interesting because obviously I run an organisation for British Asians as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think anything that highlights different stories is always great. And I think the big part of it is making sure that it's showing the diversity within the culture as well, because South Asians, even within South Asia, right? So you've got like several countries, even within India, the South Indian culture and the North Indian culture is very different to each other as well.
Yeah.
So it's taking it as a block, but also showing how people can work together, the differences. And a lot of the time, like even as a South Asian, there's so much I can learn from just listening to the other stories of people from South Asian backgrounds. And it's what I do. I always, with all the interviews I do. And it's having the openness from somebody within that community to listen to these stories and learn something new, because I think that's one of the great things about like humanity, right? Is that we get to listen to all these stories and we get to live all these like thousands of lives, which other species don't get to do. And that's a privilege and something we're lucky to do. So even before, when I used to read a lot, I'd always try to read a book or a story by somebody who's got a completely different experience to me. Because if I got an example, like there was somebody who lived in a prison, or got falsely imprisoned in, I think it was Ecuador, and lived in La Paz prison. And that experience, like I'm never going to do that, because hopefully I'm never going to end up in prison in South America. But I get to read that story and learn that experience I would never experience, right? And same thing for stories of people, like women's stories and people in America, people in Africa. And that's one thing I think for me is that great benefit we can do. And maybe people not from South Asian backgrounds don't get to hear South Asian stories as much. So if this is a way that they can then expand their minds and learn from that, then that can only be a good thing.
Yeah. Storytelling, I think, is the main key to this. I mean, the theme this year is stories to tell, like moments in life that have shaped who you are today. Is there actually one thing that you could look back on in your life where you think, that was a pivotal moment for my career or my life?
Well, the big one recently would have been my dad passing away, because that shifted me from what I was doing to more curiosity-driven to more mission-driven. But I think there's a few different moments like that throughout my life where, say, for example, when I was so I went to a grammar school, right? So I passed the 11 plus, but I actually didn't really pass. I was at 29th in border zone, and I would have gone to local comprehensive, but I was one of the last people, because a bunch of people dropped out, so I got a space in the grammar school. And that sliding door moment, it's not like my life might have been different, might have been better than it is today, but that single thing would have changed my trajectory so dramatically. When I applied to university, then I like to tell the story because it makes him sound smart. There was 60 people applied to the college at Cambridge. There was 8 spaces. I was 9th. And it's really annoying that they told me that, because I don't know if it's best to just not to know. But again, if I'd gone to Cambridge University, I would have probably ended up as a completely different person. Same thing with the job I took, right? It's all these different moments where you just don't know. And I think sometimes people can overthink those moments in the past, whereas things have happened, you've got to now live with that.
No regrets.
Yeah. And even now, like in the future, there'll be different things that come into my life where they'll change me completely again, right? And hopefully they're positive things rather than negative things, but it's going to happen, right? And me starting to write that first article, that's changed my life completely. But there was no grand mission behind that. And I think so many of those moments are unplanned, and we so often, like you said, try to control things. Whereas, like, how am I sitting here opposite you now, right? Is I went to Cambodia 2017 in the museum. I went solo traveling in the museum. There was a couple of people and I started chatting to them. She works at Sky. So I was chatting to her then. That was like 2017, right?
Yeah.
We kept in touch afterwards then, went for a few dinners and stuff. Then last month, South Asian Heritage Month, she's organising it. She said, I think you'd be good for this because of what you do. So because of that, I then went on stage last week. And because of that, I'm now talking to you. So all of these different things, it's just random moments like that.
Yeah.
And I think when people try so hard to be so mission focused and so blinkered, they lose out on all these amazing random opportunities to come across. And even with what I'm doing now with my timing, I need to have more time for that just serendipity.
We're going to move into quick fire questions next. But before we do, I wonder if you could tell me if there's an interesting fact or something not many people know about you. Or maybe you've got like a hidden talent. And I'm not going to ask you to if it's singing or anything like that, I won't ask you to sing me a chorus of a song.
Nobody wants to hear me sing, don't worry. So the problem is, because of my writing and stuff, and I tend to talk about all my different things quite a lot, but I guess obviously most people won't know, for example, that with the dancing side of things, right? It's kind of annoying for me that a lot of people are surprised I'm a good dancer. Because you think, why are you surprised? Like, what do you expect me to be?
Yeah.
So I danced Bhangra, which is a Punjabi style of dance. And it's like I dance on stage in front of 2,000 people at Sadler's Royal Theatre. And whenever there's a party, then I always jump in the middle because I'm a little attention seeker. But I've actually ripped 9 pairs of trousers now at different parties because I get the rush of the crowd and overexcited, and I need to live up to my own reputation that I have for myself now. So people who knew me from university, when it's their weddings, then they know that I can dance. They'll push me. I pretend I don't want them to do it, but I want them to do it and push me in the middle and dance.
Go on, then.
I was like, all right. Yeah. And then like, where's the camera? Okay. But I think dancing is a huge reason why I built I wasn't very confident as a kid, but then dancing helped bring that out of me. And in many ways, it's easier for me than some of the other stuff I do because you just get lost in the emotion and the music and the beat, right? So I think that surprised a lot of people that I actually can dance.
Brilliant. Right, it's time for quick fire questions. Right, quick fire questions. I've got 5 questions. You've not seen them before, and if it takes you 20 minutes to answer it, that's fine. It's just a heading, quick fire questions. So question number 1, what time do you usually wake up in the morning?
It varies, but I'd say about 6 a.m. And it's annoying because I want to wake up later. So I wake up at 6, look at my phone, and then go back to sleep again and try to get out of bed about 7:30. So that to me is the train timings, where at that time, that's when I can get the train into London.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wake up earlier than I'd like to. I know a lot of people want to wake up early. I don't like it. I like sleep.
6 is a lane for me. Definitely. Like I said, I've got 3 kids. Well, my youngest was born the 14th of last month. So
congratulations.
he's still up at middle of night feeding, but yeah, 6 o'clock is definitely a lay-in for me.
Is that why you drove 4 hours to come down here?
Yeah. Please let me come on, do it on site. I don't want to do it over Zoom. So question number 2, what is your favourite movie genre?
Say fantasy. So Lord of the Rings is probably my favourite film. So I was watching that again yesterday.
Yeah.
As my comfort for the anniversary.
Okay, what, like an all-day binge, would you say? Or because they are quite long, those films, aren't they? I mean, I've not seen them myself, but...
You've not seen them?
No, it's... See, you're going to not like me now, because I don't like dragons and witches and things like that. My idea of a good film is it's either got to be a true story or it's got to be able to happen in real life. You know, like crime or... Not, I like action, but not too exaggerated. Like people jumping out of helicopters, shooting someone and jumping back in. I can't deal with that. But yeah, it's not my cup of tea. It's wizards and stuff like that. So
I think it's the simplicity of the world, of where it's black and white, right? There's good and bad, which we don't have in real life. And so much of what I have to do is colouring between the lines and working out shades of grey. So in Lord of the Rings, this is the bad guy, this is the good guy. And you can just go along that journey, and it's simple, which I think I quite like.
I think there is still that aspect in normal life anyway, good and bad. But I think in the world that we live in nowadays, there's just a lot of stuff people can hide behind to make them seem something that they're not. But ultimately, people are either good or bad in my eyes anyway. So question number 3, would you ever appear on a reality TV show?
I've been invited a few times. Okay. I got invited to Survivor. There's no way I'm doing Survivor. Survivor's one where it's 12 weeks on the island in the middle of nowhere, right? I don't think I could do that. I could do, well, if I get myself fit again, something like Ninja Warrior. I don't know if that counts as it's more of a game show, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose it's reality. It's normal people. It's not, mind you, they do take it serious nowadays, don't they? People train for years to get on that show.
So I used to be fit. So pre-pandemic, I used to do a lot of obstacle course races. So that was my ambition, to try and go to Ninja Warrior. But then because of the knee tear last year, it slowed things down a bit.
Yeah.
So if I can get my fitness level back again, I'd love to go on something like that and just have that challenge.
And if not, Love Island.
Yeah, that's my backup. Yeah. They wanted to do, what was it? One of the other shows reached out as well. I was like, I'm not doing that. But it was going about relationships and love.
Yeah. I think I've seen the amount of reality stuff on TV now. I've seen one advertised. I thought, what on earth is this? And it was called MILF Manor.
Oh, God.
And it went women taking the sons in and then their sons getting with other elder women. And somebody's like, somebody's paid to have this on the TV, and crazy.
But people must watch it, I guess, as well, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I found myself watching like with open eyes at the advert. I thought, yeah, this is ridiculous. Right, question 4. What object do you misplace or lose the most?
I think I'm fairly good at not misplacing things. I think my AirPods.
Yeah.
I always lose them.
Yeah,
that's always a pain.
They're easy to find, aren't they, if you've got iPhone?
Yeah.
Yeah, you just walk around. What is one missed opportunity that you wish you could have a second chance at?
I'm going to need to think on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say the cliche of I am where I am now because of all the mistakes I've made and things I didn't get. There's obviously, I'd say it'd probably be more in terms of like people where I wish I apologized to people quicker or like realized my own mistakes quicker. In terms of the business sense, and I always say it's this, I kind of live in this world where because I've been able to create opportunities for myself, I believe I'm going to open up more doors in the future.
Yeah.
So if something didn't work out, that's absolutely fine. And I think that enables me to be better as a person as well, because I don't have that desperation, which maybe I had when I was younger, right? Of where I needed everything to work out because otherwise there might not be another chance. Whereas now it's like things will go wrong, things have gone wrong in my life. But as long as I try my best and don't do anything intentionally malicious, if I mess up, then I mess up and I learn from it and I go again. But I wouldn't say there's one particular moment of I wish I did something differently, because you have to learn mistakes, right? And I'm going to make more. I'm going to make loads more, which I think sometimes it's quite easy to put people on a pedestal where if they've got podcasts and like that, it's like I'm learning as well and I'm going to mess up loads more.
Yeah, brilliant. Listen, Emma, that's done. End of recording. It's been a pleasure talking to you and listening to about your career and life, past and present. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a good day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit that follow button and join me next time for more chats on Nick Needs to Know.